Good morning, everybody. Back here with the Digging Deep podcast, and today I've got Brian Kaiser, Tyler Griffin, and Andrew Crawford with me, Quint Henniger. And today we're going to be covering some more questions that I think are pretty pertinent for the time of year that it is. We are getting a significant number of phone calls to the office or to each one of us. We run into clients, neighbors, things like that, and they want to know if they can get a bid for this or a quote on that or what have you. And so there's been a bunch of that as of late, and that's kind of par for the course. So we're obviously very grateful for that, but there's a lot of things that kind of go into, what all do we need to consider in preparation of giving a bid. I think that it is, trying to think of maybe the nicest way to say this. I think that the days of being able to just give a quote in person, it's X number of dollars a cut or whatever. To me, that's not being as methodical as you should be. There are a lot of things to consider when preparing a maintenance proposal, and if they just want to know right then and there what it's going to cost per cut, then that doesn't give you time to properly evaluate not only the property, assess the customer, but also just do your due diligence there on site to evaluate and make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, because every property is different. So as we prepare maintenance bids, I'm curious to know what things do you guys always look for? What are red flags? This is gonna kill us. This is good. This is bad. What are you guys seeing, and what are you looking for every time we go prepare a maintenance proposal?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot that does go into it. Kind of to start off with, just going through and letting the customer know what all services we provide, in a maintenance contract. Not just your mowing and weed eating edging, but how we include irrigation adjustments, pruning, just some of those extras that maybe not all companies would offer. And then when we go to the site, we'll typically we'll just walk around with a customer. They kind of give us any specifics, as far as the property goes, whether they may not be super, I guess, nitpicky about one thing, but as long as the fig vine around the windows get trimmed, they're happy. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it we kind of get a feel, from the customer on kind of what their expectations are. And kind of outside of that, just after we meet with them, we'll kind of walk through and get measurements on the turf, the bed space, and that's basically for chemicals. That way we know how much product to put out on the turf, and for the bed space, and to get quantities on pine straw and mulch, things like that. And then we kind of take all that together and start forming the quote, and we'll also look for some of the other little things where maybe they have a fenced in backyard and there's a gate, and we have to look at it and see, can we get our 48-inch mower in there, or are we going to have to push mow the whole backyard? So we got to take some of those things into consideration, as far as time we're going to spend on the property. So if y'all kind of want to add to that a little bit.
I would say, what kind of plants are there? Like, if they've got Elaeagnus everywhere, you're going to spend tons of time pruning, versus if they've just got some ferns and stuff tucked in the corners. it's not going to be as much pruning. So pruning and then turf condition. Like, how much time are we going to spend extra backpacking the whole yard to get it cleaned up to where it's presentable?
Yeah, and I mean, just logistics in general. Obviously, you can go into the quote. Drive time to and from the shop to the property, and all that goes into it. I think at one point, I don't know, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, weren't there production rates for certain size mowers that would go into account? But I think kind of done away with that at this point, haven't we? I mean,
Well, I wouldn't say we've done away with it. We still know what those production rates are, but like a good example, you might be able to push mow between 5,000 and 8,000 square feet with a push mower per hour, and you kind of know that going into it. But if you've got a 4,200 square foot yard that is, it's completely chopped up. There's this little patch above this retaining wall, and there's a little area back here you've got to go through 3 gates, make sure the dog's put up in order to cut this strip, and then go around to the side yard, and their 19 children have left toys out. You spent 20 minutes picking all the toys up to push them. Yes, production rates are a good, I guess, measuring stick for kind of where you could start, but especially with residential, man, it can deviate so much. Like, you've got a property that their backyard is just the biggest open square, and you can fly through it and be done. And then I can think of other properties that you guys have where there's a little piece over here and a piece up there, and go down this path down 3 flights of stairs, and there's another little piece. And it's like, before you know it, what could be the same square footage, it's all over the place as far as the production rate goes.
yeah, I mean, so all that, like you were saying, production rates do go into, I guess, into consideration when you do a quote. But going a little bit further into that, obviously there's 4 seasons that that we have, and then we kind of break it down specifically into our contracts. You got your growing season, and then you got your fall months, and then you got your winter, and we essentially see, based off a 2 or 3 man crew, how long it would take to do those certain tasks within those seasons, and that's where your man hours kind of go into play and all that, and tree pruning and all that. It's all just, you got to go through each and every little thing that's on the property, give them the quote, and obviously if they don't want tree pruning, you can take that out. So, but you want to give them that option to do that, and like I said, you just got to go do your due diligence and make sure that you don't have to take a 21 down a flight of stairs in the back, and you just gotta cross your T's and dot your I's when you do these, or you're doing yourself and the company a disservice when you give them a quote.
Can y'all think of any other, like, I know you mentioned fig, and then you just said the type of plants, but like, do you think of any other things that as soon as you see it, you're like, well, it's going to take us twice as long,
Yeah, I mean, there's some properties where we have smilax vines over a front door, and that's something in particular. Every visit will have to have some type of work done to it, and also that's where we try to do our best on guiding the customer into going with a 26 visit option, or increase the amount going to a 42 or 46 if it's property that has a Smilax vine and big Eleagnus hedge and a bunch of boxwoods, you know, and a fair amount of turf, you know, I would push more for 42 or 46, you know, just knowing that if we go with a 26 option, you know, we'll have our hands full trying to keep up with all of those, you know, vastly growing plants.
Explain for somebody who doesn't know the 26, 42, 46.
So 26 is a contract that is every other week throughout the year, from start to end. 42 visit option, it is every other week during the winter months. So that starts in November, December, January, and February, and then it starts back weekly April 1st. 46 visit is similar, except it will go every other week starting January 1, and then it'll pick back up weekly in April. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, customers will kind of tell us which option they would want, you know, initially, and you know, there's some times where we're just honest, you know, if there's not a significant amount of plant material and a little bit of grass, you know, instead of coming every week, you know, let's start with 26 visit option, and if, you know, we need to increase services, you know, later on, then we can.
I mean, you also got to gauge their expectations too. You know, if you know they're gonna want everything
Nice
high and tight
yeah.
each and every visit, well, obviously, you can go with a 26 visit, but you're gonna have to increase your man hours
Well, and it,
on within those visits.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it would, and then it's really up to them, I guess, to break down the cost. You know, you could recommend 42 or 46 or even 52, but just, you know, give them the option to make that decision. You can give recommendations all day long, but obviously you don't know their budget.
well, and there's, yeah, that's true, but I guess getting out in front of it from sort of an expectation standpoint, like you said, if someone expects their yard to be immaculate, short and tight, all the shrubs to be, you know, turned into meatballs and meatloaf, and everything is just super tight all the time, then them being on a bi-weekly program like that, they're just gonna stay mad at you.
Yeah, it don't make sense.
They're not gonna be happy because, you know, come the 13th day, the day before we're supposed to be there, or the morning we're coming, they're gonna be unhappy. You know, there's no other way around it. They're gonna be dissatisfied. And so getting out in front of that is pretty crucial. Before we get too far off of the maintenance thing, are there times where somebody calls you up and they want a maintenance quote, and clearly they haven't had anybody taking care of their property for a while, and it just looks like a jungle, you know, and they expect you to start recurring maintenance and just get it all fixed within a week or two. That sometimes that is the expectation. When in your opinion do you take and just say, you know, time out, we're going to need to just do a cleanup so that we can maintain it from there?
Yeah, I mean, you have to do, I'd say, kind of your job as a service provider and let them know. I mean, yeah, they may have expectations, but you got to be realistic, you know, and you got to kind of guide them, I guess, so to speak, as to what those expectations truly need to be or can be. But yeah, if it's a first time home buyer and they've been doing the maintenance and you can tell they haven't they've been slacking on, they haven't been pruning shrubs like they need to be. There's weeds everywhere, vines on the houses, and now their budget may allow them to have a service provider to come in and do a routine maintenance. Then really it'd be in your best interest to guide them in the right direction and try to provide them with an enhancement, so to speak, is to come in and do a one-time cleanup to get that property under control. And to me, it may possibly be saving money in the long run.
Yeah.
I mean, when we deal with that all the time, and I kind of want to go back to what you were talking about a little bit before that. You know, if someone, I'm talking about expectations and this and that, is there a point in time to where you as a service provider just can't come to an agreement and you just, this isn't going to work out?
Yeah, it's happened a few times over the years where
they're just stuck on something, and you know that you know what you can, based off the services you provided and or can provide, you know, and the quality of work. You know, you don't want to just go stick your sign in somebody's yard to where it looks, to be honest, looks like crap, because based off their budget and this and that, you can't do your best to provide the quality service that you want to.
Well, yeah, in I don't know. So there are certain standards. It's kind of hard to make even a good example, and I think this is sort of like a really tricky niche of our industry where, you know, we want all of our customers to pay well, to pay on time, so that we can go do, you know, really nice work, make the beds weed free, the turf weed free, the plants pruned as they're supposed to be, the way, you know, in accordance with their natural form, and, you know, and have a really nice and professional, you know, presentation for that property. And unfortunately, you know, like you said about people's, you know, budgets, sometimes the budget doesn't call for that. Well, that's the same reason why I don't have a steak sandwich from, you know, the local steakhouse for lunch every day. My budget doesn't allow for it. But at the same time, there are certain,
and the restaurant standards won't allow that.
There are certain standards, right, where, you know, I can go get a ham and cheese sandwich for pretty inexpensive, but that cheese, that bread, and that meat still met a certain standard in order to make it to the table.
When you're not going to get that at Firebirds or something, you know, I mean.
No, maybe not, but that's still one of those things where, you know, so long as there are people operating out of a, you know, a 1998 Buick LeSabre with a push mower and a Homelite curve shaft weed eater in the back of it, there will still be people not presenting, you know, that tier of quality, you know, that table quality, and they'll go out there and they'll hack and slash at some stuff, you know, make marginal improvements, I guess, to the property, charge a very minimal amount, and if that makes the customer happy, then
that service provider.
Then you have to leave room for that,
Yeah.
and so, you know, you couldn't have a guy with one leg cross-eyed go put together a brick building and say, hey, that's, you know, that's good enough.
Yeah.
Because it has to meet a standard, but for whatever reason, our industry still has an awful lot of ambiguity on what's okay and what's not. So, So I guess to get back to your question, yes, there are times where, and really it goes to budget and expectation. There are times where we may have a customer who has an overgrown property, and they say, I don't have the money to spend on a big initial cleanup. So here's what I'd rather you do. Bill me a little more per month and chip away at it. I don't care if it takes all season for some of these things to happen. And those thresholds are that all the shrubs get pruned, we get some bed definition again. We work on, some weed content and start trying to get this place in shape. It's March, and I understand that we may not really see all the benefits of your extra labor until August or September. And if that is the expectation going in, that's somebody you can do some work with.
Yeah.
But it's the ones that have that same property and say, you're a landscape company, this is what you do, just get it fixed in like the first visit or two, and then just take care of it, But I'm not paying more for that, and we're not doing an initial cleanup. Well, you're asking for something that I can't provide,
Yeah, maintenance is more maintaining. It's not.
Yeah, it's not the other thing,
Their
I
expectations are.
I don't go get an oil change and tell them to go ahead and,
Clean your truck
paint,
out or whatever.
and paint the truck while you're at it, and not expect to be charged for that,
People's
Just
expectations are, especially sometimes these days with the way budgets and economy is, can be unrealistic sometimes.
Yeah. And you've got to get out in front of that.
Yeah.
Being real clear. The thing that you can really mess yourself up on, I don't care if it's a maintenance proposal or an enhancement proposal, new installs, it doesn't matter what it is. If you're not clear on what you're going to do, and that's something that, I was here when each one of y'all started putting bids together. And it probably drove you absolutely insane when we first started doing bids together. But I was always really particular about what you say and what you don't say, right? And all of you are like, yep, but you've put enough together now to where you see the folly in not being really, really clear. Where, you say you're gonna put sod in the front yard. You better say how much you're putting. You better say where you're putting it. You better put those things down, because you don't want to get into a place to where you say resod front yard. Well, you meant the area that the utility company tore up.
Yeah.
No, it just says resod front yard. So, all 38 pallets worth are getting done. And now you're gonna be in a situation where technically it could go to court, and it could be anybody's game, right?
And you can also be too clear, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Too specific. I mean, there's been times where I've had to, or I've asked a question here and there, and it's not that you're leaving stuff vague because you wanna have in the scope of work as close as you can exactly what you're doing, but if you're too specific, once again, it can bite you in the butt sometimes, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you're, I guess the thing that kind of sticks out in my mind, if you're taking a hedge that's, currently 12 feet and they're wanting it down to 6 feet, I'd try to say, prune hedge 6 to 7
approximately,
because if you say prune to 6 foot and they go out there with a tape measure,
yeah,
they're like, well, this is 6.5, so you gotta cut another 6 inches off. So I understand where,
And yes,
but
and that
you
makes
would much
perfect
rather
sense.
be overly clear, very precise than being vague.
Well, and even if the goal was to get it to renewal prune a hedgerow from 12 foot to 6 foot, you know, yeah, the goal is 6 feet, and you know, maybe terrain doesn't allow for it, or there was a reason why you didn't hit that mark. You know, yeah, giving yourself the wiggle room, but that's where it's still methodically putting together the verbiage in that contract that says, you know, you're going to prune, you know, this hedge down from this footage to this, you know, in not working in those certain absolutes where you know it's going to hurt you. So you're still being very, I think it's still you being very specific. You're specifically choosing to say, we're going to get roughly 6 feet, approximately 6 feet, what have you. You know, it's still you putting all those little details in, so that being super ambiguous about where you're putting solder, or being so precise, you know, in a measurement that either one hurts
You're
you.
putting
You know.
yourself into the corner.
Yeah. So, but that still goes into that situation where because we're going to keep talking about managing people's expectations, whether it's your crews or your clients, or you guys dealing with me, or us dealing with the owners of the company, you're just dealing with the public in general. It doesn't matter who it is. If you're clear about what it is what you're trying to accomplish, how much it's going to be, all of those things, the more upfront you are about all of these different things, there's a chance this doesn't work out. There's, you know, you had to move some giant pots a while back. You know, we can't guarantee that they don't crack when we move them, you know.
Yeah, putting disclaimers on there and
You have
covering
to
your
do
butt.
all that. And so having all the hard conversations up front and being clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish, it doesn't matter if it's maintenance or whatever, you have way less people problems down the road.
Would you say
Way
that
less.
putting disclaimers, whatever you want to call it, like that on quotes, sometimes can hinder you from selling a potential job?
Yep, but if
But at the
someone's
same
not
time-
willing to stomach a disclaimer, like, you know,
Yeah,
we're going to have to take down
You don't want to do business.
a 40-year-old wooden fence that's being held up by, you know, by one nail, and you have no idea which one it is. And you say, we've got to take this down to move a machine back here and do the work and put it back. There's a chance that this thing doesn't hold up, you know, in this process. And they're like, well, my gosh, you know, you've destroyed my fence. No.
Yeah.
This fence is 3 days older than baseball. Like, it's any minute a breeze is going to take it out anyways.
It just goes back to unrealistic expectations.
It is.
I mean, you don't go to a park like Oak Mountain or somewhere, or just in something in general where you've got to sign a waiver, you know, or something, and buck the waiver, because at the end of the day they're gonna be like, well, then you just can't come in to the park, or
Right.
you can't do this activity,
Right.
or whatnot. So I mean,
So yeah, if a potential client can't operate with us within the realm of reasonable, you know, I don't think that there's many times where we approach somebody and put them in some, you know, ludicrous position, you know, because that's not the goal either. You don't get to stay in business doing stuff
Right.
like that. But in the instance where we have sort of we've got a couple of very peculiar conditions, site conditions, or whatever it is that are really, really giving us a lot of cause for concern. And if you're willing to, you are understanding and accepting of this situation and this condition, that if this happens, then this. If they're fine, let's rock and roll. But if there's a catastrophic failure if those things aren't agreeable, then we just might not be the company for you,
Yeah.
you know? And I would rather lose out on that small amount of revenue and retain position, retain standards, and retain reputation than to go trudge through that muck and mire and create,
end
you
up in
know,
court.
create a potential civil suit, have our reputation dragged through the mud, create a bunch of backlash in the community. I don't want all that. Nobody does. So I would rather them just call our competitor.
It amazes me, and I understand just the way we do quotes, and then if I look at quotes that I get from contractors, whether it be at my own home or what have you, it just the difference in wording and specifics. I'd say just based off what I've seen and how we do things, it's way more different than what most contractors do. Because I've seen some that are just completely vague, and it's like, well, I understand we talked about this and we know what we're doing, but
It's
they
not on
could,
paper.
yeah, no, it's not on paper. And
Yeah.
it, like I said, I understand it all, but I'd say ours, to me, are definitely way above
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've got a bunch of
industry
compliments
standard.
on them.
Mhm.
Whether we got them or not, they still complimented how we had everything laid out.
Yeah.
It tells you, month by month what we're going to be working on.
Mhm.
It shows you what we're really going to be there doing and
Mhm.
how often.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and well, to what you said, we've even had subcontractors who that have, whether it's been for tree work or building a fence or tearing down an old structure, it doesn't matter what it was. You get this kind of receipt book kind of little work order with a number on it, and it's like, okay, well, but this doesn't cover this. We talked about you're going to use this type of hardware. We talked about this condition has to be met, so on and so forth. And I'm totally in agreement of all the things that we talked about and what you're going to charge to do it. But all of it's not represented on here, and I want that. And sometimes you kind of get that, but it's like, no. This is for your good as much as it is mine, If you want to get paid X, then
need to show
make me a contract for Y, Yeah, that's, all of that is I think, to me, it's crucial to run a business. Otherwise, you're going to get to run around and I just feel like you're kind of flying by the seat of your pants, and it's just going to take one civil suit to pull you way back down to earth and possibly put you out of business. Just way too dangerous of a game.
Yeah, I mean, like I had a new masonry that we'd never done work with, and he just sent me a quote through text message. And I think I called you and asked a few questions about, I agree with the scope of work through text message, but, should I get him to send me it in a formal email or a formal quote and this and that? And you kind of walked me through as to why and this and that, and the importance of it. Just because he was founded that way, of course. But yeah, like you said, it's crucial. So I'm thankful for, I guess, what I've learned throughout these years as to why we do certain things and wording and this and that in quotes. And to me, it's just more professional.
Yeah,
all around.
it for sure is. I think that if take out the liabilities and take all that other stuff away, what would you rather get? Would you rather get just a text message that says, for what we talked about, it's X $100, or would you rather have a formal proposal on company letterhead with that looks like somebody
They know what
actually
they're doing.
put it together, and you can take that to the bank, like, I have this, it's legitimate. Yeah, I'd rather have that every day. So it's just a good first foot forward kind of thing versus just some kind of barroom napkin contract, you know. Anything different that you take into account, like when preparing enhancement quotes? And I know enhancements are all over the place, you know, as far as it could be as something as simple as just a little bit of pine straw or a few small plants, or it could be big trees, or it could be a new driveway or whatever. I know it's all of those things, but what are, like, you know, your core number of things that you're like, I always check for these things?
To me, I would say site conditions for sure, and logistics.
So, like, what would be some things that are like red flags? Like, oh,
I mean, if
this is a
you're
problem.
going to plant, you know, just call it 10 3-gallon azaleas on a hillside, but there's 30-year-old pines on the hillside as well. Well, you know that you're gonna obviously run into a bunch of roots.
Yeah.
And that the production rate's gonna go way down compared to you building a bed and bringing in fresh topsoil and just being able to dig in fresh dirt.
Well, you saying planting azaleas, you know, you just did a job here recently planting azaleas. Well, the problem is where, you know, the ideal enhancement job is you park the truck beside where you're working. So a few football fields away, you've got to tote 84, 85 azaleas. And thank goodness they're only 3-gallon pots, but, you know, it was like, as you were compiling the proposal, you know, and we have a production rate for how quickly we can do that, and you were putting everything together, and I said, well, you know, how are we going to get them back there? We'll be toting them 2 or 3 at a time. How long is that going to take? A long time.
Yeah, I think the camera just cut out, but we just restarted. But what we're talking about is location of the work being done. So I mean, obviously, if you can pull the truck up next to the curb, take the plants from point A to point B, and it's 2 feet, obviously production rate should be a lot quicker than versus having to drag the plants all the way in the backyard.
Yeah.
I think the camera cut out, but I just wanted to reiterate that. So
Yeah,
location,
Yeah.
logistics, and the site itself all play a big role for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, definitely logistics. I mean, you know, the price difference and, you know, installing a pallet of sod where, you know, maybe that area is, right by the street, and you can pull your truck right up there, you know, throw the sod off and be done, you know. Or it could be that pallet of sod has to go in the backyard. You can't, you know, get a machine back there to carry the pallet. Maybe it's down a hill and it stays wet and you can't even wheelbarrow it, you know, and you just have to, you know, hand carry it down there, you know,
Up the stairs and around the pool, or
you know, and all that, you know, could take 2 days, where, you know, by the street may take, you know, a few hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, you know, you gotta, and sometimes that's hard to explain to the customer, you know, or maybe they see it, but maybe not want to understand it, you know, why the cost of that may be so high. And you have to kind of walk them through.
I know contractors that have a set price per pallet installed, and it's just like, I don't understand how you can.
No, I ran into that exact scenario one time. We had actually done some work for somebody, and they knew pretty close to what our per pallet price was, you know, at least for the front yard, and the work that we had done was in the front yard. Well, their backyard, there was like a big 6-foot fence, and in between that and a retaining wall was sort of like this really heavily planted area with just a few stepping stones that kind of meandered through it. Then a retaining wall with a wrought iron gate over the top of it. And back there, above all of the elevation, is where they wanted another pallet of sod. And so when I gave them the quote for that, so I was in that situation. I've got to go through multiple gates, and I can't wheelbarrow it without damaging more stuff. So it was going to be grab 2-3 pieces of sod and tote it, 150 feet from the truck, through 3 gates, up a staircase, and across another 60-70 foot of backyard. And when they got the price for what that pallet of sod was, they were like, that was as much as all those other pallets you did in the front. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's just different. And they were upset about it because, trying to get somebody to understand how much more difficult something is, or, like we've done work at places where we've planted large caliper trees before, but then we have to get to fit through a really high traffic, very public place and take them through, through the property and put them in a place where we've got to kind of quarantine off an area and go through all of these extra steps. And what was, the cost of those 2 trees being installed was the same cost as planting 10 other ones. And people don't understand those things. It's like, there's a lot of moving parts to make this go well. And it could go poorly quickly, if we don't plan. There's all kinds of stuff like that where, yes, just the site in general, logistics, going through all that stuff, but I'd say utilities too.
Yeah.
I think if you're not calling 811,
That's a big one.
you're an idiot, Just say it like it is. You are a dummy if you're not calling 811 because,
Fiber optic cable is expensive, ain't it?
yeah, I mean, the gas lines,
Yeah.
when Spectrum and the plumber and the electrician and, Dish and everybody else starts showing up because you didn't pick up the phone, you better know that's going to be one expensive missed call.
And honestly, you just look like an idiot,
Yeah. When you have a free resource like
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Just use it.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, definitely all of those things, they've got to be taken into account when you're putting stuff together because otherwise you're either misquoting your customer or you're going to put yourself out of business. Mm-hmm. Like there's kind of only 2 ways. You only get lucky so many times. So, well, you got anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Pretty much it.
All right. Well, we greatly appreciate you listening here and checking in with more content that we have. We would ask that you subscribe to the video, and give us any feedback. Send us more questions if you'd like to hear our input on any of those, and we'll make another one next week. Y'all have a good one.